She helped a disabled man every day. And one day, he walked in with 20 bikers, and everything in her quiet life changed. A lonely diner worker thinks she's just doing a small good deed, helping a struggling veteran who can barely walk. But when he suddenly shows up standing tall and surrounded by 20 grim bikers filling the diner wall to wall, she realizes something big and dangerous has been happening behind her back. Because these bikers aren't here for trouble, they're here for her. They know something she doesn't. Someone has been stalking her, watching her, waiting for the right moment to strike. And now these men say they owe a debt so deep, they'll risk everything to protect her. But what secret is the disabled man hiding? Who is coming after her? And what will happen when the truth finally steps out of the shadows? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The sunrise painted the sky in gentle brush strokes of pink and gold as Sophia Anders arrived at the Morning Star Diner. Her keys jingled softly in the quiet dawn air as she unlocked the front door, the familiar scent of coffee and yesterday's pies greeting her like an old friend. The small roadside establishment sat just outside of town, a beacon for truckers and locals alike, seeking comfort food and a friendly smile. Sophia moved through her morning routine with practiced ease, her footsteps echoing in the empty diner. The laminated menus needed wiping, and she hummed quietly while doing so, a habit that made the solitary work feel less lonely. She arranged gleaming silverware wrapped in paper napkins at each place setting, making sure everything was just right. The coffee maker gurgled to life under her careful attention. It was an older model that sometimes needed extra coaxing, but Sophia knew its quirks like she knew the regulars' orders. She pulled fresh mugs from the dishwasher, setting them in neat rows on the counter, ready for the day ahead. Through the large windows, she watched the sky brighten fully, transforming from dawn's watercolors to the crisp blue of early morning. Right on schedule, just as the clock struck 6 o'clock, she saw a familiar figure making his way across the parking lot. Jonah Hale moved slowly, leaning heavily on his cane. His progress was steady but cautious, each step carefully measured. Sophia's heart ached a little, as it always did, watching him navigate the simple task of walking. The proud set of his shoulders couldn't quite hide the pain that flickered across his face with each step. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, and Sophia looked up with a warm smile. "Good morning, Jonah," she said softly, already reaching for his favorite mug. He nodded in greeting, his features relaxing slightly in the familiar environment. "Morning, Sophia." Just then, a loud clatter erupted from the kitchen, where Mike, the cook, had dropped a pan. The sharp sound echoed through the quiet diner, and Jonah's reaction was immediate. His whole body tensed, knuckles whitening around his cane's handle, eyes darting to assess potential threats. Sophia moved quickly but calmly, placing herself in his line of sight. "It's just Mike in the kitchen," she assured him, her voice steady and gentle. "Would you like your usual booth? The one with the good view of the door?" Jonah's breathing slowly steadied, and he gave a short nod. Sophia didn't hover as he made his way to the booth, but she stayed close enough to help if needed. She'd learned over the months how to read his moods, when to offer assistance, and when to step back. The vinyl booth squeaked softly as he lowered himself into it, carefully propping his cane against the wall within easy reach. Sophia waited until he was settled before placing his coffee in front of him. Black with just a splash of cream, no sugar. Steam rose from the cup in delicate wisps. "Give me a few minutes to get your breakfast started," she said, already knowing what he would order. It was always the same: 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, hash browns. "Sophia," he called softly as she turned to leave. "Thank you." She knew he wasn't just thanking her for the coffee. Over the past few months, she'd been quietly adjusting his bill, ensuring he could afford his daily breakfast despite his tight veteran's pension. She never mentioned it, and neither did he, but the gratitude in his eyes spoke volumes. "You're welcome, Jonah," she replied simply, heading to the kitchen to place his order. As she worked through the morning, serving other customers as they began to trickle in, Sophia kept a watchful eye on Jonah's booth. She noticed how he always sat with his back to the wall, how his eyes tracked movement through the diner, how he flinched slightly at sudden noises. But she also saw how the tension in his shoulders gradually eased as the familiar routine of breakfast at the diner worked its quiet magic. When she brought his food, she also slipped him an extra slice of toast and a small bowl of fresh fruit, items that wouldn't appear on his bill. It was their unspoken arrangement, born of her compassion and his quiet dignity. "Weather's turning cooler," she commented as she refreshed his coffee. It was their usual kind of small talk, safe and undemanding. "Yeah," he agreed, his voice low and rough from disuse. "Autumn's coming early this year." Their conversations were never long or deep, but over the months they had developed a comfortable rhythm. Sophia had learned to read the subtle signs that told her when he was having a particularly bad day with his injury, or when his memories were weighing heavily on him. On those days, she made sure his coffee cup stayed full and the diner's radio played a little softer. The day passed in its usual pattern of rush hours and lulls, of regular customers and traveling strangers. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the parking lot, Sophia began her closing routine. She counted the register, wiped down the counters one last time, and said goodbye to Mike as he headed out the back door. Finally, she pulled on her light jacket and stepped out into the cool evening air, locking the diner's door behind her. The streetlights were just beginning to flicker on, creating pools of yellow light along her walk home. She didn't notice the parked car several blocks away, or the shadowy figure watching her progress. Across the street, partially hidden by the growing darkness, Jonah Hale stood quietly. He had made it his unofficial mission to ensure Sophia made it safely through the first part of her walk home, though she never knew it. His military training had taught him to spot potential threats, and something about her walking alone in the dimming light set off his protective instincts. He watched until she turned the corner onto the better-lit main street, then turned away into the darkness. His cane made soft tapping sounds against the pavement as he headed in the opposite direction, disappearing into the gathering night. The evening settled around the empty diner, the neon "open" sign now dark, waiting for another day to begin. The simple routine would start again tomorrow, Sophia arriving at dawn, Jonah appearing right at opening, their quiet dance of compassion and gratitude continuing in its gentle rhythm. The morning sun painted the diner's windows in soft golden light as Sophia turned the key in the lock. Her mind wandered back to yesterday, to the haunted look she'd seen in Jonah's eyes. It wasn't the first time she'd noticed that distant gaze, but something about it had seemed different, heavier somehow. Inside, the familiar scent of coffee and clean surfaces welcomed her. She moved through her opening routine with practiced ease, starting the coffee makers, checking the prep stations, wiping down already clean counters. Her movements were automatic, letting her thoughts drift as she worked. "Morning, Sophia," called Mike from the kitchen as he pushed through the swinging doors. The clatter of pots and pans followed him, marking the real start of another day. The regulars began filtering in as the clock struck 6. Old Mr. Peterson, with his newspaper tucked under his arm. The Johnson sisters, both retired teachers who loved to gossip over their morning pancakes. The construction crew from the site down the road, their orange vests bright against the diner's muted colors. Sophia felt the weight of tired muscles as she moved between tables. Her late-night walk home had left her more exhausted than usual, but she kept her smile warm and genuine. Years of experience had taught her how to push through fatigue, how to make each customer feel like they were the most important person in the room. During a quiet moment, she stepped outside to check her car, parked in its usual spot behind the diner. The tires looked a little low, not flat, but definitely needed air. "Just regular wear," she murmured to herself, making a mental note to stop by the gas station after her shift. The thought of it being anything else never crossed her mind. The lunch rush came and went, but Jonah hadn't appeared at his usual time. Sophia found herself glancing at the door more often than necessary, worry creeping into her thoughts. When he finally arrived well past 1 o'clock, the tension in his shoulders was visible even from across the room. "You're late today," she said softly, already pouring his coffee. "Everything okay?" Jonah nodded, but his eyes kept drifting to the parking lot visible through the window. "Just had some things to take care of," he answered, his voice rough and distracted. She watched as he positioned himself differently than usual, choosing a booth that gave him a clear view of both the parking lot and the diner's entrance. His hands wrapped around the coffee cup, but he barely drank from it. The afternoon stretched on, quiet except for the usual diner sounds, the hum of conversations, the clink of silverware, the sizzle from the kitchen. Sophia kept an eye on Jonah while serving her other customers. Something was different about him today, something that made her chest tight with concern. The peace shattered when a truck backfired in the parking lot, the sound like a gunshot in the quiet afternoon. Before Sophia could even process what had happened, Jonah was under the table, his body curled tight, trembling violently. Without hesitation, she knelt beside him, making sure to leave him space. "Jonah," she said, keeping her voice steady and calm. "You're at the diner. You're safe. It was just a truck backfiring." His breathing came in sharp, ragged gasps. She could see his hands pressed against the floor, knuckles white with tension. Slowly, carefully, she continued talking, her voice a gentle anchor to the present moment. "Feel the floor under your hands, Jonah. Listen to the coffee machine humming. Smell the apple pie we just took out of the oven. You're here. You're safe." Gradually, his breathing steadied. The trembling eased. Long minutes passed before he finally moved, pushing himself back onto the bench seat. His face was pale, shame and embarrassment evident in his avoiding gaze. "Don't," Sophia said quietly, before he could apologize. "You don't need to explain." The rest of the afternoon passed without incident. As closing time approached, an elderly couple's car broke down in the parking lot. Sophia couldn't bring herself to leave them stranded, so she stayed late, helping them contact their son and keeping them comfortable with coffee and pie while they waited. She didn't notice that Jonah had stayed too, sitting quietly in a dark corner booth. When she finally stepped out into the night air, he followed a few moments later, his cane making soft sounds against the pavement. The movement caught his trained eye immediately, a shadow, slipping behind the building across the street. His body tensed, combat instincts firing, but he kept his face neutral. Sophia didn't need to know. Not yet. Not until he was sure. She waved goodbye, completely unaware of what he'd seen, and headed home. The walk was peaceful, the night air cool and refreshing after the long day. Once home, she made herself a cup of chamomile tea, the familiar routine helping to ease the tension from her shoulders. Across town, in a small apartment, Jonah stood by his window. His phone felt heavy in his hand as he dialed a number he hadn't used in years. When the line connected, he spoke just 4 words, his voice grim with certainty. "I think it's starting." The words hung in the darkness, heavy with meaning. He ended the call without waiting for a response, knowing his message would be understood. Outside his window, the night stretched quiet and dark, holding its secrets close. Dawn painted the sky in gentle strokes of pink and orange as Sophia pulled into the diner's parking lot. It was earlier than her usual shift. Mary, the owner, had called last night, asking if she could handle breakfast prep. Of course, Sophia had said yes. She could never say no when someone needed help. The morning air held a crisp chill as she gathered her purse and jacket from the passenger seat. That's when she noticed it, a folded piece of paper tucked under her windshield wiper, fluttering slightly in the breeze. Frowning, she plucked it free and unfolded it. 4 words stared back at her in harsh black ink. You can't hide forever. Her heart skipped a beat, but she quickly pushed down the flutter of unease. Just kids playing pranks, she muttered, crumpling the paper and tossing it into the nearest trash can. Still, her hands trembled slightly as she unlocked the diner's front door. Inside, she threw herself into the familiar routine of morning prep. The rhythmic chopping of vegetables for omelets, the soft whir of the coffee maker, the clinking of plates as she stocked the service counter. These sounds helped steady her nerves. By the time the first customers arrived, she had almost forgotten about the note. The morning rush kept her busy until well past 10 o'clock. When Jonah limped in around 10:30, she noticed immediately that something was different about him. His usual quiet demeanor had an edge to it today. His eyes swept the diner methodically, taking in every detail, every face. Even the way he held himself seemed more alert, despite the obvious pain in his leg. "Morning," she said, already reaching for the coffee pot. "You're earlier than usual." He nodded, lowering himself carefully into his usual booth. "Thought I'd try breakfast for a change." His voice was gentle, but his eyes studied her face intently. "Everything okay, Sophia? Anything unusual happen lately?" The note flashed through her mind, but she pushed the thought away. "No, nothing," she said, feeling her cheeks warm with embarrassment. "Just the usual." "You'd tell me if something was wrong?" His question was soft, concerned. "Of course," she lied, forcing a smile. "Everything's fine." Throughout the day, she caught him watching her with that same worried expression. It made her both uncomfortable and oddly touched. Nobody had shown such concern for her well-being in a long time. The afternoon lull had just begun when Jonah suddenly straightened in his seat, his attention fixed on something outside. Sophia followed his gaze to the gas station across the street. A man stood beside a dark sedan, apparently filling his tank, but his attention seemed focused on the diner. Before she could get a good look at him, he quickly got into his car and drove away. Jonah's jaw tightened, his hand gripping his cane until his knuckles went white. He stayed until closing time, nursing cups of coffee and barely touching his food. When other customers left, he remained in his booth, his presence a quiet guardian. As Sophia finished her closing duties, she found him waiting by the door. "Mind if I walk with you?" he asked. "Thought I could use some fresh air." Something in his tone made it hard to refuse, even if she usually preferred to walk alone. They fell into step together, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the sidewalk. Despite his limp, he matched her pace perfectly. "You don't have to do this," she said after a while. "I know," he replied simply. "I want to." When they reached the corner where their paths would diverge, he hesitated. "Sophia," he started, then seemed to think better of it. "Have a good night." "You too, Jonah. Thank you for the company." At home, Sophia curled up in her favorite armchair with a cup of tea, thinking about Jonah's kindness. It was nice, she decided, having someone care enough to notice when something was off. Even if she couldn't bring herself to tell him about the note, his presence had made her feel safer somehow. Across town, in his sparsely furnished apartment, Jonah sat at his kitchen table. A small lamp cast yellow light over his hands as they moved methodically, polishing the worn military patch he'd carried through 2 tours. The familiar eagle emblem gleamed dully in the low light. His mind wandered to the man at the gas station, to the way he'd watched Sophia with such focused intensity. The patch in his hands represented a past he'd tried to leave behind, but now that past was reaching for Sophia. His fingers traced the edge of the eagle's wing, remembering promises made and lives lost. Sleep would not come easy tonight, but that was nothing new. He had a new mission now, keeping Sophia safe, whether she knew she needed protection or not. The night settled around him as he continued his vigil, the patch a reminder of both what he'd lost and what he now stood to protect. The streets outside his window were quiet, but he knew better than most that danger often wore silence like a cloak. The darkness before dawn wrapped around Sophia like a familiar blanket as she approached the diner. Stars still dotted the sky, their light barely visible against the approaching sunrise. Her footsteps echoed in the empty parking lot as she made her way to the front door, keys jingling softly in her hand. The familiar routine calmed her nerves. Unlock the door, step inside, find the light switch. She had done this hundreds of times before, but today felt different somehow. The silence seemed heavier, more watchful. As she stepped inside, the bell above the door chimed again. Her heart leaped into her throat and she spun around, keys falling from suddenly numb fingers. There in the doorway stood Jonah. But not the Jonah she knew. This man stood straight and tall, his shoulders squared, no cane in sight. The transformation was stunning. Where was the pained limp she'd grown so used to seeing? The way he carried himself now spoke of strength, of purpose. "Jonah?" she whispered, barely recognizing her own voice. He stepped inside, his movements fluid and assured. "Morning, Sophia." Before she could respond, movement behind him caught her eye. Dark figures filled the doorway. One after another, huge men in leather jackets filed into the diner. They moved with military precision, spreading out to fill the booths and counter seats. 20 of them, she counted in disbelief, each wearing the same patch on their jackets that she'd seen Jonah polishing the day before. The men sat quietly, but their presence filled the space with an almost physical weight. Despite their intimidating appearance, tattoos, leather, and stern expressions, they carried themselves with an unmistakable air of respect. Several nodded politely in her direction. What's happening?" Sophia managed to ask, her voice trembling slightly. Jonah bent down to retrieve her dropped keys, holding them out to her. "These are my brothers," he said softly. "The 21st Guardian Riders. We served together overseas." One of the larger men, sporting a gray-streaked beard, spoke up. "Jonah saved all our lives in that explosion. We owe him everything." Sophia's mind whirled, trying to process this sudden revelation. "But why are they here? Why now?" Jonah's expression grew serious. "Because someone's been watching you, Sophia. Someone dangerous." "No." She shook her head, denial automatic. "You're mistaken. I'm nobody important." "I saw him twice," Jonah said quietly. "Once across from the diner at the gas station. Before that, I followed you home one night to make sure you were safe. He was there too, watching from his car." The color drained from her face as she remembered the note under her windshield wiper. Jonah wasn't finished. "3 nights ago, I confronted him in the parking lot after you left. He ran, but not before I got a good look at him. Jonah's jaw tightened. I recognized him from some old case files. He's not someone you want following you. Why didn't you tell me? She asked, hurt, creeping into her voice. I didn't want to frighten you until I was sure. Once I was, I called in my brothers. He gestured to the men around them. We protect our own, Sophia, and you're one of ours now. The bikers nodded in agreement, their presence suddenly feeling less intimidating and more reassuring. These were men who had fought together, bled together, saved each other's lives. Now they were here to protect her. But your leg, she gestured at his steady stance. I don't understand. A small smile crossed Jonah's face. The injury was real, still is, but sometimes pain takes a back seat to necessity. When I realized you were in danger, something clicked back into place. The physical therapy I'd been avoiding suddenly seemed worth the effort. One of the riders spoke up from his place at the counter. That's our lieutenant. Tough as nails when someone needs protecting. Sophia opened her mouth to respond, but movement outside caught her attention. A dark sedan crept past the diner windows, moving slowly enough to see the driver clearly scanning the interior. The atmosphere in the diner changed instantly. As one, the 20 riders rose to their feet. Their movements were smooth, coordinated, speaking of years of training and shared experience. They formed a subtle barrier between Sophia and the windows, their faces hard and alert. Jonah moved closer to her, his voice low but firm. You're not alone anymore, Sophia. Whatever's coming, we'll face it together. The car made another slow pass, the tension in the diner thick enough to cut with a knife. But Sophia found herself standing straighter, drawing strength from the unwavering presence of these men who had chosen to protect her. For the first time since finding that threatening note, she felt truly safe. The sedan's headlights swept across the diner windows once more as it completed its third circle of the building. The riders stood motionless, watching, waiting. Their stillness spoke of contained power, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Whatever happened next, Sophia knew one thing for certain. She was no longer alone. As the dark sedan's taillights disappeared around the corner, the tension in the diner remained thick. Jonah touched Sophia's elbow gently, guiding her toward the largest booth. Let's sit down. There are some things you need to know, and some people you should meet properly. The 20 riders gathered around, pulling up chairs and crowding into nearby booths. Despite their imposing presence, they moved with careful precision, as if trying not to overwhelm her. First, Jonah began, these are the men who became my family overseas. He gestured to each man in turn, introducing them with quiet pride. Marcus Thompson, our communications specialist, saved our unit more times than I can count by keeping those radios working. A weathered man with salt and pepper hair nodded respectfully. David Chen, best medic in the field. A shorter man with kind eyes gave a small wave. He patched me up after the explosion. One by one, Jonah named them all. James the demolitions expert, William the sharpshooter, Michael the navigator. Each man had a story, a skill, a moment where they'd proven their worth in combat. But more than that, each one had a moment where Jonah had saved their lives during that fateful explosion. Lieutenant pulled me out of the burning Humvee himself, said Robert, a broad-shouldered man with a thick mustache. Leg was already injured, but he wouldn't leave anyone behind. Sophia listened, her heart aching as she began to understand the depth of the bonds between these men. But when Jonah's expression grew more serious, she felt a chill run down her spine. Sophia, he said softly, we need to tell you why we're really here. His hands clenched slightly on the table. The man who's been watching you, I recognized him from the police bulletins. It's Daniel Crawford." The color drained from Sophia's face. She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in 3 years, not since she'd testified at his sentencing. "Your ex-fiancé," Jonah continued gently. "He was released from prison 2 weeks ago. Local police contacted Veteran Services because of his history, and word got to me through some old connections." Sophia's hands trembled as she wrapped them around her coffee mug. He was supposed to serve 5 years. "Good behavior," Marcus spoke up, his voice tight with disapproval. "But from what we've heard, he's anything but reformed. He's been telling people you owe him money, loyalty, obedience." "You don't owe him anything," Jonah said firmly, seeing the shame creep into Sophia's expression. "What he did to you was wrong. Leaving him was brave. Testifying was braver still." The riders murmured in agreement, their faces showing genuine concern rather than the pity she'd feared. These were men who understood trauma, who had seen the worst of humanity but chose to stand against it. "We've developed a protection plan," Jonah explained, spreading out a roughly sketched map of the area. 4 men will maintain watch on the diner during operating hours, rotating positions to avoid drawing attention. 3 more will monitor the approaches to your home. The rest will run regular patrols of the surrounding streets. Sophia shook her head, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "I can't ask you all to do this. You have your own lives, your own families." "You're not asking," said David, the medic, his voice gentle but firm. "We're offering. This is what we do. We protect our own." "And you became one of our own," William added, "the moment you started helping our lieutenant. We've all noticed the changes in him since he found this place, since he found you." Sophia looked around at their faces, scarred, weathered, but filled with determination and kindness. These men had fought in wars, had seen the worst humanity could offer, yet here they were, ready to defend a simple waitress who had shown kindness to one of their own. Thank you," she whispered, wiping away a tear. The rest of the day unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. The riders spread out through the diner, some reading newspapers, others nursing coffee cups, all while maintaining strategic positions near windows and doors. They paid for their meals, tipped well, and managed to look like ordinary customers to anyone glancing in. But Sophia noticed how their eyes never stopped moving, how they communicated with subtle gestures and nods. Regular customers seemed slightly intimidated at first, but the riders' polite demeanor and Jonah's calm presence helped maintain a relatively normal atmosphere. Several times throughout the day, Sophia caught glimpses of motorcycles cruising past, other riders maintaining their patrol pattern. As closing time approached, Jonah introduced her to Pete and Ray, the 2 riders assigned to escort her home. Both men were former Force Recon Marines, their alert eyes constantly scanning their surroundings as they walked with her. At her front door, Ray stayed with her while Pete circled the house, checking windows, doors, and potential hiding spots. Only when they were certain the house was secure did they let her enter. "We'll be close by all night," Pete assured her. "Different positions, different times. If you need anything at all, you call Jonah. We'll be here in minutes." Sophia locked her door, double-checking it twice before getting ready for bed. As she lay in the darkness, she could hear the distant rumble of motorcycles making their rounds, like mechanical guardian angels keeping watch. The sound, rather than frightening her, brought an unexpected comfort. For the first time in days, she felt truly protected. The rumbling grew louder, then faded, then returned again, the riders maintaining their vigilant patrol through the night. Sophia listened to their engines, each pass reminding her that she wasn't alone anymore. These men, these warriors who had seen so much pain and violence, had chosen to stand between her and danger. because of kindness she'd shown without thought of reward, because they protected their own. The morning sun crept through Sophia's bedroom window, its gentle rays warming her face. She blinked awake, feeling groggy after a night of interrupted sleep, but there was an unfamiliar sense of security wrapped around her like a blanket. Throughout the night, she'd heard the steady rhythm of motorcycles patrolling her street, a sound that had gradually transformed from threatening to comforting. A soft knock at her door made her jump, until a familiar voice called out, "Miss Anders, it's Mike and Chris. We're here to walk you to work whenever you're ready." Sophia smiled, remembering the rider's promise to protect her. She quickly got dressed, pulled her hair into a neat ponytail, and grabbed her purse. Opening the door, she found two burly men in leather vests standing at home. Attention! Their eyes already scanning the quiet street. "Good morning," she said softly, touched by their dedication. "Morning, ma'am," Mike replied with a gentle smile that seemed at odds with his intimidating appearance. "Beautiful day for a walk, isn't it?" They fell into step beside her, one slightly ahead and one behind, maintaining a protective formation that made her feel simultaneously safe and somewhat overwhelmed. The morning air was crisp, and their boots made solid sounds against the sidewalk as they walked. As they approached the diner, Sophia spotted Jonah through the window. He was moving between tables with determination, methodically wiping each surface. His movements were careful but purposeful, and she noticed he was putting more weight on his previously injured leg. Inside, the familiar smell of coffee and bacon greeted them. Jonah looked up, his face brightening at the sight of her. "Morning, Sophia," he called out, continuing his cleaning routine. "Hope you slept okay." "I did, thanks to everyone," she replied, hanging up her purse and donning her apron. "But what are you doing here so early?" Jonah gestured to the tables with his cleaning cloth. "Physical therapy assignment. Doc says repetitive movement helps build strength. Figured I might as well make myself useful while I'm at it." The first customers began trickling in as Sophia started the coffee makers and prep work. She couldn't help but notice their reactions to the presence of the riders. Some elderly regulars hesitated at the door, eyeing the leather-clad men with uncertainty. But then something remarkable started happening. Tom, one of the largest riders, stood up to help Mrs. Henderson with her heavy purse, pulling out her chair with a gentleness that made the old woman beam. Another rider held the door for a mother struggling with a stroller, while a third helped Mr. Patterson read the menu when he forgot his glasses. Throughout the morning rush, Sophia found herself moving through a changed diner. The riders maintained their vigilant watch, but they did it with such natural courtesy that the regular customers gradually relaxed. They became part of the diner's rhythm, passing sugar packets, offering napkins, making space for newcomers. Around midday, during a quiet moment, Jonah caught her eye and motioned her to join him at the counter. He'd finished his cleaning routine and was sitting more comfortably than she'd ever seen him. "I wanted to tell you something," he said, his voice low and earnest. "Something important." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "You know, when I first started coming here, I could barely walk. The pain was bad, but the lack of purpose was worse." Sophia listened, feeling the weight of his words. "But you," he continued, "you never treated me like I was broken. You'd slide that coffee across the counter like I was just another customer, but then you'd remember exactly how I liked it. You noticed when I was having bad days, but you never made me feel weak for having them." His hands clasped together on the counter, knuckles white. "It was your kindness that made me want to try harder in therapy, made me believe maybe I wasn't done yet. Every time you treated me like a whole person, it helped me remember I could be one again." Sophia felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Jonah, You helped me find my will to stand again, Sophia. Not just physically. You helped me stand as a person." His voice was rough with emotion. "I need you to know that." A tear slipped down her cheek as the full impact of his words hit her. She'd never imagined her small acts of kindness could have such a profound effect. All she'd done was treat him with the dignity everyone deserved. The afternoon passed in a blur of customers and coffee refills. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the windows, Sophia found herself sharing a quiet booth with Jonah. The dinner rush had ended, and several riders were engaged in a lively card game at a nearby table, their laughter mixing with the clink of coffee cups. "I never thought I'd say this," Sophia admitted, watching the riders playfully argue over their cards. "But I actually feel safe. Really safe." Jonah smiled, a genuine warmth reaching his eyes. "That's what family does," he said simply. "They make you feel safe." As closing time approached, it was Steve's turn to walk her home. The sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, creating a peaceful backdrop for their walk. Steve, a former reconnaissance expert, maintained professional awareness while keeping up friendly conversation. "You know," he mentioned casually as they neared her house, "we haven't seen a single suspicious vehicle today, not one." He smiled at her surprised look. "We've been keeping very careful track." Sophia felt a weight lift from her shoulders, a weight she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. "Really?" "Really," Steve confirmed. "Doesn't mean we're letting our guard down, but it's a good sign. Sometimes just knowing someone's watching out for you is enough to keep the wolves at bay." Standing at her door, Sophia looked back at the pink-tinged sky, feeling for the first time in days, truly at peace. The rumble of distant motorcycles reminded her that she wasn't alone anymore. She had protectors, friends, maybe even, as Jonah had suggested, a family. Dawn painted the sky in soft pastels as Sophia stepped onto her front porch, breathing in the crisp morning air. She nearly bumped into Mike and Dave, two of the riders, who were already hard at work replacing her flickering porch light. "Morning, Miss Sophia," Mike called down from his ladder. "Hope we didn't startle you. This old light's been giving you trouble, and we figured it's about time someone fixed it properly." Dave looked up from where he was sorting through tools. "Yeah, can't have you coming home to a dark porch. Plus, we're installing a motion sensor. Real, top-of-the-line stuff." Sophia felt warmth spread through her chest at their thoughtfulness. In the driveway, she spotted 3 more riders examining her car, their motorcycles parked nearby. "Those tires are practically bald," one called out. "We've got new ones in the truck. Won't take but an hour to swap them out." Before she could protest, another rider, Jack, she remembered, appeared from behind her building. "Back door's got a weak frame," he reported. "Already picked up some reinforcement plates and better locks. We'll have it secured by noon." Overwhelmed by their generosity, Sophia could only manage a quiet, "Thank you." The riders just nodded, continuing their work as if helping her was the most natural thing in the world. At the diner, another surprise waited. A hand-painted wooden sign hung near the entrance, its letters carefully crafted. "You are safe here." The words made her throat tight with emotion. Through the window she could see Jonah inside, already setting up for the day. "The guys worked on it all night," he said softly as she entered. "They wanted you to know, wanted everyone to know, that this place is protected." Sophia traced the letters with her fingers, noting how each one had been painted with care. "It's beautiful," she whispered. As they prepared for opening, Jonah moved with increasing confidence, his limp less pronounced. During a quiet moment, he settled into a booth and motioned for her to join him. "I've been wanting to tell you something," he began, his hands clasped on the table, "about what happened overseas and after." He took a deep breath. "The explosion that injured me, I was supposed to be leading point that day, but I had swapped positions with Danny," One of our youngest. He didn't make it." Sophia reached across the table, covering his hands with hers. "For months after, I couldn't shake the guilt. Should have been me out front. Should have spotted the threat sooner. The depression got so bad I couldn't see a way forward." His voice grew rough. "Then I found this place, found you." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "You probably didn't notice, but that first day I was in bad shape. Hadn't eaten in days. But you just smiled, brought me coffee, treated me like a person worth caring about. Every day after that, your kindness was like a lifeline. Little by little, it pulled me back." Tears slipped down Sophia's cheeks as Jonah continued. "You gave me something to look forward to, someone to talk to who didn't see me as broken. You'll never know how many dark days you helped me through, just by being you." The week progressed, with the riders becoming a fixture in the community. They organized a fundraiser dinner to help with Sophia's outstanding medical bills from her mother's final illness, something she'd never mentioned, but they'd somehow discovered. The evening of the fundraiser arrived, transforming the diner into a warm, buzzing gathering space. The riders, surprisingly skilled, in the kitchen, prepared a feast of comfort food. The town turned out in force, filling every table and booth. Sophia moved through the crowd, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. Mrs. Henderson pressed a pie into her hands. Mr. Patterson brought his famous meatballs. Even the town's usually gruff mechanic showed up with a casserole. Near the end of the evening, Jonah stood, gently tapping his glass for attention. The room fell quiet. "Most of you know me as the guy who limps in here every morning for coffee," he began, drawing gentle laughter. "What you might not know is that Sophia Anders saved my life. Not in a dramatic way. She did it one cup of coffee, one kind word at a time." He turned to face her. "Sophia gives so much to others, never asking for anything in return. She took care of her mother through a long illness, working double shifts to pay the bills. She's helped countless customers who were short on cash. She's made this diner more than just a place to eat. She's made it a home for many of us." Sophia felt tears welling up again as Jonah continued. "Tonight, we get to give something back. To show her that kindness doesn't go unnoticed, that community means standing together." After the last guest left, Sophia stood in the doorway, taking in the aftermath of the evening. Empty plates and warm conversations had left their mark. The "You are safe here" sign caught the last rays of sunset, glowing softly. Looking at the happy chaos, dishes piled high, chairs askew, leftover desserts covering the counter, Sophia felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Real, solid hope for the future. The kind that comes from knowing you're not alone anymore. The riders moved around her, cleaning up, their presence both protective and familiar now. This was more than safety. It was belonging. It was family. The warmth of the successful fundraiser lingered in the air as Sophia began her closing routine. Her heart felt lighter than it had in years, despite her exhaustion. The clock read 11:15 as she wiped down the last table, listening to the quiet conversation between Jonah and 3 riders who had stayed behind to help. "Almost done," she called out, dropping the cloth into the sanitizer bucket. "Just need to count the register and we can head out." Jonah nodded, his eyes constantly scanning the darkened windows, a habit she'd noticed more lately. "Take your time. We're not going anywhere without you." The final count showed they'd raised over $2,000. Sophia carefully locked the money in the safe, her hands trembling slightly with gratitude. After double-checking all the appliances were off, she grabbed her purse and joined the men waiting by the door. The night air hit her face as she stepped outside, keys jingling as she locked up. The parking lot lights cast long shadows across the asphalt, and something felt wrong. Terribly wrong. "Oh no," one of the riders breathed. The fundraiser, banner that had hung proudly all evening, now lay in shreds across the ground. Pieces of glass glittered in the dim light. Every window of the diner had been smashed. But worst of all, stark red letters screamed across the white wall. "She's mine!" Sophia's knees went weak. No, no, no. Get her back, Jonah ordered sharply, pushing her toward the riders. He stepped forward, scanning the area with military precision. It happened so fast. A dark figure burst from behind the dumpster, swinging something heavy. Jonah spun, managing to get between the attacker and Sophia. There was a sickening crack as the weapon connected with his shoulder. "Jonah!" Sophia screamed. The masked man fled into the darkness as two riders gave chase. The third stayed with Sophia, who was trying to reach Jonah as he sank to one knee, his face tight with pain. "We need to get him to urgent care," the rider said, already on his phone calling for backup. "Marcus, get your truck!" Everything blurred into chaos. Sophia found herself in the back seat of a pickup truck, cradling Jonah's head in her lap as they sped toward the medical center. Tears streamed down her face as she stroked his hair. "I'm so sorry," she whispered over and over. "This is all my fault. I'm so sorry." Jonah reached up with his good arm, squeezing her hand. "Not your fault," he managed through clenched teeth. "Never your fault." The fluorescent lights of the urgent care center seemed harsh after the dark night. Nurses rushed Jonah into an exam room while Sophia paced the waiting area, hugging herself tightly. More riders arrived, filling the small space with their protective presence. Hours crawled by. Every time the door opened, Sophia's head snapped up, hoping for news. Finally, around 3:30 in the morning, a doctor emerged. "Mr. Hale will be fine," she announced, and Sophia nearly collapsed with relief. The blow caused significant bruising, and we're concerned about possible hairline fractures, but nothing's broken. He needs rest and will be sore for several weeks. They let Sophia see him briefly. Jonah lay propped up on pillows, his shoulder heavily wrapped. Despite the pain medication, his eyes were alert as they fixed on her. "Don't you dare blame yourself," he said before she could speak. "And don't you dare run." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "But you're hurt because of me." "I'm hurt because a coward attacked from behind," Jonah corrected firmly. "This changes nothing. We're not stopping until you're safe." Dawn was breaking as two riders drove Sophia home. She barely registered their concerned looks or the guard who positioned himself outside her apartment door. Inside, she collapsed onto her bed, still wearing her work clothes. Her laptop sat on the nightstand. With trembling fingers, she pulled up the bus station website, scanning departure times. Maybe if she left quietly, disappeared without telling anyone, they'd all be safe. She could start over somewhere new, somewhere her past couldn't hurt the people she cared about. The screen blurred as more tears fell. She clicked on a route heading west, the cursor hovering over the purchase ticket button as guilt and fear warred in her heart. Sunlight crept through Sophia's bedroom window, rousing her from a fitful sleep. Her eyes felt gritty, and her work uniform was wrinkled from sleeping in it. The laptop still sat open beside her, the bus schedule glowing accusingly on the screen. She'd fallen asleep before buying a ticket, but the temptation to run still pulled at her. A knock at her door made her jump. Through the peephole, she saw Jonah leaning heavily between two riders, his shoulder thickly bandaged under his t-shirt. Her hands shook as she undid the locks. "You're supposed to be resting," she scolded softly, but her voice cracked with emotion. Jonah's eyes went straight to the laptop. "And you're supposed to be letting us help you." He limped inside, grimacing. "I know that look, Sophia. I've worn it myself. But running won't solve anything." "I can't watch you get hurt because of me," she whispered, wrapping her arms around herself. Any of you. We're already hurt, Jonah said quietly. Every man out there carries scars, but we heal better together. He reached for her hand with his good arm. You're not a burden, Sophia. You never were. One of the riders, a tall man with graying temples, stepped forward. We've increased surveillance around your apartment and the diner. Motion sensors, cameras, all feeding directly to our phones. The police have been notified about last night's vandalism and assault. Thank you, Mike, Jonah nodded. Shall we head to the diner? There's work to be done. Sophia started to protest, but the determined looks on their faces stopped her. They walked slowly, matching Jonah's pained pace. More riders appeared from parked cars and side streets, forming a protective circle around them. In the morning light, the damage to the diner looked even worse. Shattered glass crunched under their boots. Inside, a dozen riders were already working. Some swept up glass, while others measured windows for replacement. 2 men carefully scraped the spray paint from the wall, and another group reinforced the back door with new deadbolts. Stop, Sophia pleaded, her voice breaking. Please stop, you can't keep doing this. I'm not worth all this trouble. The activity ceased. Tools lowered slowly as every man turned to look at her. A heavy silence filled the diner, until an older rider with salt and pepper hair stepped forward. His weathered face was kind as he approached her. I'm Briggs, he said softly. They call me Captain. And with all due respect, ma'am, you're wrong about your worth. He gestured to Jonah. 6 months ago, this man could barely leave his house. The explosion that saved our unit left him with more than just a bad leg. It broke something inside him. We watched him disappear into himself, day by day. Briggs's eyes grew, misty. Then he started coming here. Told us about this waitress who never rushed him, who smiled even when he couldn't speak, who slipped him extra food when money was tight, who treated him like a person, not a broken soldier. He took her trembling hands in his. Your kindness brought him back to us. You didn't just serve coffee. You saved his life. Tears spilled down Sophia's cheeks as Briggs pulled her into a gentle hug. The riders protect our own, he murmured, and your family now, whether you like it or not. Throughout the day, Sophia watched in awe as the men worked with practiced efficiency. They moved like a well-oiled machine, anticipating each other's needs without words. By late afternoon, new windows were installed, the walls were clean, and additional security measures were in place. As evening settled in, the riders arranged themselves around the diner like sentinels. Some played cards, others cleaned weapons, but all remained alert. Jonah sat beside Sophia in their usual booth, his good arm draped protectively across the back of her seat. I've never had anyone fight for me before, she admitted quietly, watching the riders maintain their vigil. Get used to it, Jonah replied, his voice warm with certainty, because we're not going anywhere. Sophia looked around at these fierce, loyal men who had become her protectors, her family. The urge to run had faded, replaced by something stronger: belonging. As night fell outside, she was surrounded by unwavering guardians who would move heaven and earth to keep her safe. In the soft evening light, the diner felt like a fortress of friendship and determination. The riders settled in for the night, their presence a silent promise that she would never face her fears alone again. Dawn painted the sky in gentle brush strokes of pink and gold as the riders took their positions around the diner. Some sat in parked cars, others lounged on motorcycles, while a few wandered in for coffee. To casual observers, they might have looked like ordinary customers, but their watchful eyes never stopped scanning the surroundings. Inside, Jonah slumped in a booth near the counter. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his injured shoulder made every movement a challenge. Still, he refused to leave. Each time Sophia passed by, he offered a tired smile, that somehow made her feel safer. "You should be resting at home," she said softly, refilling his coffee cup. "I am resting," he replied, though his stiff posture suggested otherwise. "Just doing it here where I can keep an eye on things." The morning rush brought its usual parade of regulars, many now comfortable with the leather-clad men who had become fixtures in their small town. Around noon, the bell above the door chimed as Officer Raymond Mills stepped inside. His presence brought a hush to the diner as he made his way to where Jonah sat. "No solid leads yet," Officer Mills said, removing his hat and settling into the booth. "But we've doubled. Patrols in the area. Every officer has his description and vehicle information." Sophia brought him a cup of coffee, her hands steady as she poured. She'd grown stronger these past few days, drawing courage from the protective circle around her. "Thank you, Officer Mills," she said. "Would you like your usual lunch?" "That would be great, Sophia." He smiled warmly. "You're holding up okay?" She nodded, surprising herself with how much she meant it. "I have good people watching over me." Throughout the afternoon, Sophia moved between tables with growing confidence. The riders' calm presence gave her strength, their quiet vigilance a shield against fear. Even the regular customers seemed to sense the change in her, offering encouraging words and gentle support. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the windows, the peaceful atmosphere shattered. The door burst open with a bang that made everyone jump. There he stood, her ex-fiancé, his face twisted with rage. "Sophia!" he roared, taking 2 aggressive steps inside. "Where are you, you worthless—" Before he could finish, the riders moved as one. Those nearest stood up slowly, creating an imposing wall of leather and muscle. Others filed in from outside, their boots heavy on the floor. The few remaining customers pressed back against their booths, wide-eyed but silent. Sophia froze behind the counter, her heart hammering. But she wasn't alone anymore. Jonah pushed himself up from his seat, ignoring the pain that flashed across his face. Despite his injury, he drew himself to his full height and limped forward, positioning himself directly between Sophia and her ex. "You need to leave," Jonah said, his voice quiet but carrying an edge of steel. "Now." Her ex laughed, an ugly sound that echoed through the silent diner. "You think you scare me? All of you?" His eyes found Sophia behind Jonah's shoulder. "She belongs to me, always has, and no bunch of crippled soldiers is going to stop me from taking what's mine." The riders didn't move, didn't speak. They didn't have to. Their presence alone filled the diner with unspoken power, years of combat experience evident in their steady stance and unflinching gaze. Though outnumbered 20-1, her ex planted his feet, his face contorted with possessive fury. "She belongs to me," he snarled again, fists clenched at his sides, "and I'm not leaving without her." Before her ex could lunge forward, Captain Briggs stepped smoothly to the front. 4 other riders moved with practiced precision, spreading out to form an impenetrable barrier. Their movements were controlled, deliberate, maintaining enough distance to avoid physical contact while completely blocking any path to Sophia. "Stand down," Briggs said firmly, his voice carrying the weight of decades of command experience. Jonah stood his ground, shoulders squared despite the pain. His eyes never left the threat before them. "You have no claim on her," he said evenly. "No rights, no ownership. Sophia is free of you, and she's protected now." Around the diner, phones appeared in steady hands. At least 6 riders held their devices up, recording every second of the confrontation. The red recording lights blinked silently in the tense air. Her ex's face twisted with rage. "You think you're so tough with your little camera phones? You don't know what I'm capable of. She ruined my life when she ran. She owes me everything." "The only thing ruining your life is you," Jonah replied calmly. "And the only thing Sophia owes anyone is the 35 cents she borrowed from me for coffee last week." A flash of red and blue lights suddenly painted the diner's walls. Through the windows, 3 police cruisers pulled up, their lights spinning in the growing darkness. Her ex's face drained of color as he realized what was happening. "You called the cops?" he snarled, but his voice wavered. "The moment you walked in," one of the riders confirmed, still recording. "Breaking the restraining order was just the start of your mistakes today." Officer Mills was the first through the door, followed by 2 other officers. They moved with swift efficiency, securing the scene. "Sir, put your hands where we can see them," Mills ordered. Her ex tried to back away, but found his path blocked by more riders. "You can't. This isn't. She's lying about everything." "We have video evidence of the vandalism," Mills stated professionally as he approached with handcuffs. "Multiple witnesses to your stalking behavior, documentation of threats, and now you've violated the existing restraining order. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." As the officers moved in to restrain him, the fight seemed to drain from her ex's body. The handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists, and reality finally appeared to sink in. Sophia, who had been frozen behind the counter throughout the confrontation, felt her knees give way. She slid down to the floor, tears streaming down her face as months of fear and tension released all at once. Jonah was at her side in moments, easing himself down next to her despite his injured shoulder. "It's over," he murmured, his arm gentle around her shoulders. "You're safe now. Really safe." The riders maintained their positions until the officers had fully secured their prisoner. As they led him toward the door, he tried one last time to turn toward Sophia, but Briggs and the others blocked his view completely. Through the diner's newly repaired windows, the rotating lights of the police cruisers cast alternating shadows across the floor. They watched in silence as her ex was guided into the back of a patrol car, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Sophia's sobs gradually quieted to hiccups as the adrenaline ebbed away. The protective circle of riders remained steady, their presence a shield between her and the world until she was ready to stand again. The headlights of the departing police cars swept across the diner's fresh windows, the glass reflecting back their light, like a final reminder that the darkness was passing. Dawn painted the sky in gentle strokes of pink and gold as Sophia walked toward the diner. Her steps were lighter today, unburdened by the fear that had weighed her down for so long. The morning air carried the crisp scent of possibility, and for the first time in months, she felt truly free to breathe it in. As she rounded the corner, she stopped short. The entire parking lot was filled with motorcycles, gleaming in the early light. The riders stood in a group near the entrance, their faces bright with anticipation. But what made her heart skip was the sight above the door. There, freshly mounted and beautifully crafted, hung a new wooden sign. The letters were hand-carved with care. Sophia's Place, where kindness changes lives. The morning sunlight caught the edges of each letter, making them glow like honey. "Oh," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. Jonah stepped forward from the group, his injured shoulder wrapped in clean white bandages. Despite the obvious discomfort, he stood tall and sure, his eyes soft as they met hers. "We wanted to make it official," he said quietly. "This place, it's more than just a diner. It's where lives change, where mine changed." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes, spilling over as she took in the sight of these strong men who had become her protectors, her family. Captain Briggs grinned broadly, while other riders shuffled their feet, looking pleased but slightly embarrassed by the emotion of the moment. "You all did this?" she managed to ask, her voice trembling. "Jonah's idea," one of the riders called out. We just provided the muscle." Jonah moved closer, taking her hand in his. His touch was gentle but sure, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers like they belonged there. "Sophia," he said, his voice deep with feeling. "I need to tell you something." She turned to face him fully, aware of their audience, but somehow feeling like they were the only two people in the world at that moment. "Before I met you, I was just existing, going through the motions, using that cane as a crutch for more than just my leg." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But you saw me, really saw me. Every morning you treated me like a person worth caring about, worth saving. Your kindness, it gave me hope when I'd forgotten what hope felt like." Sophia's tears flowed freely now, but she couldn't look away from his earnest face. "I want to keep standing beside you," Jonah continued, his voice growing stronger. "Because you're my hope, Sophia. You're the reason I found the strength to heal. And if you'll let me, I want to be part of your future." Behind them, someone sniffled loudly, followed by a chorus of throat clearing from the tough bikers trying to maintain their composure. "I'd like that," Sophia whispered, squeezing his hand. "I'd like that very much." A cheer went up from the riders, echoing across the parking lot. Several regular customers who had gathered to watch the scene unfold joined in the applause, their faces bright with genuine joy for the woman who had served them with such care over the years. Jonah's smile could have lit up the darkest night. Together they walked toward the diner's entrance, his stride matching hers perfectly. As she unlocked the door, the morning sun streamed through the windows, filling the space with golden light. The riders filed in behind them, taking up their usual spots, but this time as welcome regulars rather than protective guards. The familiar coffee maker hummed to life, and the scent of brewing coffee mixed with the morning air streaming through the open windows. Regular customers began trickling in, but today was different. Each person who entered seemed to carry a special warmth, a deeper appreciation for the safe haven this diner had become. An elderly couple who had been coming in for years hugged Sophia tight, whispering how happy they were to see her smile again. A group of veterans, having heard about the diner through the Riders Network, claimed a corner booth, their faces relaxing as they felt the welcoming atmosphere. The morning rush picked up, and Sophia found herself moving through the familiar routine with new energy. Jonah worked beside her, pouring coffee and greeting customers like he'd been doing it his whole life. His presence at her side felt natural, right, like the final piece of a puzzle sliding into place. Through the windows, the sun continued its climb into the sky, casting long rays across the checkered floor. Outside, the motorcycles gleamed in the parking lot, their chrome catching the light. Every so often, the deep rumble of arriving bikes would sound through the walls, more riders coming to share in the warmth of this special place. Sophia paused for a moment at the counter, taking in the scene before her. The diner buzzed with conversation and laughter. Veterans shared stories with truckers passing through. Local families chatted with the riders, who had somehow transformed from intimidating figures into beloved members of the community. And there was Jonah, moving between tables with grace and purpose, his smile genuine and bright. This was more than just a fresh start. It was a triumph of kindness over fear, of community over isolation, of love over darkness. As she picked up another coffee pot to make her rounds, Sophia felt her heart swell with gratitude and joy. Here, in this simple diner with its new sign and old soul, she had found not just safety, but home. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.